hello. Is that okay? Is it okay from here, or I have to put the mic closer? Is it okay down here? Okay. Yes. Okay. No. Okay. Closer. Ah, okay. All right. So hi everyone. We're gonna have a quick group photo before the session starts. And I also would like to announce that there will be simultaneous interpretation for Korean, English. Please use the receiver if you need simultaneous interpretation. Channel 1 for Korean, channel 5 for Korean and channel 6 for English. So that will be only for our guests here in the room. And now we're going to proceed with a quick group photo. So please, the University of Utah Asia Campus staff and faculty, if you want to come to the stage for a quick group photo before we start the session. Thank you so much. All right. Welcome you all, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, to this special session, which is part of the UNESCO 5th International Conference on Learning Cities. The title of this session is Active Community Engagement and Awareness for Inclusive Cities, Coping with the Current and Future Urban Pandemics. This is an event organized by the University of Utah Asia Campus, institution which is located here in South Korea, in this very city of Songdo in Jeonsu-gu. My name is Alberto Gonzalez. I'm an adjunct faculty of urban ecology at the University of Utah Asia Campus, Department of City and Metropolitan Planning. It is an honor and a pleasure to be introducing this session and moderating the panel discussion for you today. We have a fantastic lineup of speakers from around the world in this session. But firstly, please allow me to give a special welcome to some of the distinguished guests that we have here in the room. UNESCO Institute for Lifelong Learning Director, Dr. David Achuarena, University of Utah Asia Campus Chief Administrative Officer, Dr. Greg Hill. Thank you all for finding time out of your busy schedule to be here with us today. For those of you visiting or joining us from abroad, I would like to start by telling you that Jeonsu is a truly learning city. Not only because of the number of educational institutions located here in Songdo, but also for its quality and its transformational approach. This city hosts about a dozen of domestic and international university campuses, as well as capacity building offices from multilateral organizations and research institutions. Therefore, it is indeed a wise choice by the UNESCO Institute for Lifelong Learning and by the Global Network of Learning Cities to select this education hub as the venue for such a high-profile conference. So I kindly congratulate Director Achuarena and his team for this achievement. As a resident of South Korea myself for the last 5 years, I would also like to stress that it is impressive to see how Korean society value and respect education at the very top of the priority list. History tells us that this has been fundamental in the positive changes and great development achieved throughout its challenging periods. It is claimed that education has been and will continue to be a fundamental and leading engine for economic growth and general progress in Korea. An educated and actively learning population pushes its leaders to give the best possible outcomes. Therefore, as several speakers mentioned yesterday in the plenary session, access to quality education and knowledge sharing empowers citizens to make informed decisions in ever more complex urban contexts. Well, here we are today in Korea, a country which ranks first in innovation for the 8th consecutive year, according to the 2021 Bloomberg Innovation Index, talking about lifelong learning from emergency to resilience. Such a topic that has become essential in these challenging times of pandemic. So as the proverb says, no one is born a master. And since learning is a future-oriented process, which requires time and dedication, I believe today we are here in a great setting in order to share some time, exchange some knowledge. Hopefully, the coming presentations and discussions will inspire our audiences on further developing better and more resilient cities, aiming to build happier and healthier communities together. And now, without further ado, please let me introduce you to our session, which will start with the opening remarks by Dr. David Acho-Arena, Director of the UNESCO Institute for Lifelong Learning. Dr. Acho-Arena has been Director of the Division of Policies and Lifelong Learning Systems at UNESCO, with oversight of education policies, higher education, adult and vocational education and training, and ICT in education. Before joining UNESCO headquarters, Dr. Acho-Arena worked at the UNESCO International Institute for Educational Planning, where he conducted research and capacity building programs in the fields of education planning, lifelong learning, technical and vocational education, as well as higher education. He also contributed to the capacity development of officials from ministries of education as the head of the Training and Education Programs Unit of IEP. Please join me and welcome him with a big round of applause.
Well, good morning to all. Okay, is it fine now? Yeah. Good morning to all. Mr. Alberto Gonzalez, thanks for your kind words of introductions, dear colleagues from the University of Utah and other scholars who will be participating in this session. And thanks, it's a pleasure for me to be here with you this morning on a topic which is of high relevance and also of high importance for lifelong learning and for the current work also that we are doing at UNESCO's Institute for Lifelong Learning. Today we are here as part of a big event, the 5th International Conference of Learning Cities, which has been one of the major, I would say, milestones in the development of this flagship program of UNESCO and the UAL, which is the promotion and the development of lifelong learning at local level through the engagement of cities, and which is materialized through the establishment of the global network of learning cities, 229 cities around the world today in 64 countries. And we're very privileged to be here in Korea, which is the member state with the largest number of members in the GNLC network. So Korea has been really a pioneer in the promotion not only of lifelong learning as a national policy for human resources development and for development in general, but also when it comes to the promotion of this concept of learning cities. And as you know, there is a very strong and very vibrant national association of learning cities here in Korea. One of the important elements of the learning city approach is bringing together all the stakeholders who are responsible for engaged with lifelong learning. So it's not only education institutions, it's also the business community, it's also civil society organizations. But of course, education institutions have an important role to play in making this strategy, this lifelong learning strategy, really effective and vibrant at local level. And within the network of educational institutions at local level, universities, of course, have a very important role to play because of the broad role that they play in society, but because also of their capacities, resources, engagement, not only in education, but also in research and extension. So in that context and in preparation for the upcoming World Conference on Higher Education, you may know that every 10, 12 years, UNESCO organizes a big international conference on higher education. So the last one was in 2009. It took place in Paris. We were supposed to have the conference on higher education this year in Barcelona, in Spain. However, because of the COVID-19 situation, it was decided to postpone by 1 year. So this large event will take place next year, also in Barcelona. And in preparation for the discussions of this gathering, UL, my institute, launched an initiative to explore how universities today are active in participating in lifelong learning. So as you know, to a large extent and for a long period of time, I mean, the engagement of universities in the lifelong learning, or sometimes it was mentioned under the theme or the concept of continuing education, has taken place through the so-called third missions of universities, you know, extension services, reaching out to and providing services to the community. In many institutions, this has been a little bit, I would say, overlooked, and the focus has been placed more on education and even more research. And in a context where the field of higher education has been more and more, I would say, driven by a competition between institutions, in particular in the context of globalization and in the context of the emergence of this this attention and the importance being paid to ranking, as you know, the Shanghai ranking. So universities have been really placed maybe first and top priority to be recognized as institutions of excellence, first of all, in terms of research. So to a large extent, community and engagement, and even sometimes education has suffered, you know, and all the mechanisms, the incentive systems, the evaluation systems, the quality assurance systems in the higher education sector have been driven by this order of priority where serving the community has not been really considered as the top priority. Things are changing, and we are seeing that also in a context where, well, globally, the world is going through this aging process. I think Korea is a very good example of this. So in fact, higher education institutions are competing now to find students in with declining age cohorts. So there is also a kind of pressure to find new clients in a way for higher education institutions. And this has also resulted in universities paying more attention to other, you know, target groups, including older students. So to review, you know, and map this trend, we conducted an international survey last year to actually document how universities are evolving when it comes to serving the community, when it comes to providing lifelong learning services, also in the way they themselves define and conceive their role, their mission in serving the community through lifelong learning. So the results of this survey will be presented at the conference. And at the same time, we also launched a number of case studies to document how in different parts of the world, specific institutions are actually developing strategies to reform their offerings, their also delivery patterns, often by using distance and online learning. And of course, with COVID-19, we've seen a kind of intensification of this trend. So we are going to put together a number of case studies of institutions documenting this element. One of the topics that we're going to also explore, again, looking at particular institutions and particular cities, is how universities are engaging and being active partners of learning city strategy and process. So this is for us also very important, and of course within the context of this conference is quite meaningful. So I believe that within that framework, the topic of this session this morning is quite I think important, and will be useful to have also from your perspective and your experience insights on how this is actually happening, and how through your institutions, university deliveries is actually taking into account other needs, other target groups, and other perspectives than the regular and conventional missions of universities. Thank you very much for your attention. Again, I look forward to hearing, the outcomes of your discussion. I would like to also invite you to follow on our website the development of this project, and we will be issuing, as I said, later this year, first set of results, and the full outcome through a publication will be released next year. Thank you very much. Kamsahamnida.
Thank you so much, Director Acharena, for your opening remarks. Very insightful addresses on stakeholder engagement, and happy to hear that you will be going to my home country, Spain, to the city of Barcelona soon for that very important conference. So I hope you enjoy it there. Now let me introduce you to the welcoming address by Dr. Gregory Hill, Chief Administrative Officer at the University of Utah Asia Campus. Dr. Hill has extensive experience in academia and research. Before joining the University of Utah, he was an associate professor of public policy and administration at the Boise State University in Idaho, United States, where he served also as the director of the Idaho Policy Institute, chair of the Department of Public Policy and Administration, and program director for the Public Policy, PhD. His research interests center on public management and administration, policy theory, and immigration policy. Dr. Hill has extensive survey and research experience in the academic, public, and private sectors. And most recently, he has supervised research at the Idaho Policy Institute in the areas of local government resource management, homelessness, Native American relations, and public defense. So please join me welcoming Dr. Hill with a big round of applause.
Thank you, Alberto. Yeah, thank you. It's gonna be easier. Thank you, and welcome everybody. It's a great honor to be here with you today. I want to give a special thanks to UNESCO for hosting this conference here in Yansugu. Welcome to Dr. David Acharena. So grateful to have you here joining us. And I don't know if you know this or not, Dr. Acharena, but the University of Utah's marketing colors are red and white. So I noticed that you wore your red tie. I can only assume you did that because you knew that University of Utah was red. And so we're grateful to have you with us. I also want to give say thank you to the mayor of Yansugu, Mayor Ko. And although I know he's not here, but the amount of effort that he put in and his team put in to execute on this conference is admirable and needs to be congratulated. So I'm really grateful for him. This has been a long process, this conference. We were approached over a year ago with the idea of participating in this conference, not knowing if Yansugu was going to be part of it. And as we've watched it come to fruition, we at the University of Utah Asia Campus are in fact honored to be part of it. In fact, as we saw the proposal of what the conference was intended to be about, we got very excited because it matched really nicely with what it is that we do at the University of Utah Asia Campus. And I want to give just a very brief introduction of the University of Utah's Asia Campus. The University of Utah has an extended campus right here in Songdo, and we offer multiple degrees, and our students from around the world have the opportunity to come to Korea and receive a Western style education with teachers from professors from all around the world who are University of Utah faculty. They spend 3 years with us in Korea and then 1 year in the Salt Lake campus in Utah in the United States and receive a University of Utah degree. So it's a very exciting model, and we're so happy to actually be here in Korea to talk about these things at this time. What we do know is that sustainable cities are vital to our future. We live in a changing world with changing demographics, a changing climate, changing attitudes, and all of those things mean that we need to have some adaptability to our lived environment. And in order to do that, we need to emphasize this idea of lifelong learning and developing lifelong learning strategies. And as Dr. Acharina said, Korea is one of these places that does in fact have these enrollment challenges. We see it very clearly. But we're committed at the University of Utah Asia campus to working with Korea to be part of the solution to lifelong learning. And so we are hopeful to engage in that. And we are excited because the University of Utah's Department of City and Metropolitan Planning, and more particularly the Urban Ecology program at the University of Utah Asia campus, is efforting to address these very issues. This work is by definition interdisciplinary. It's not just city planners, it's not just architects, it's not just civil engineers, it's all of these different groups to get public policy planners. It's all of these different groups together that are able to make us create an environment that will be sustainable and adaptable and continuous learning process along the way. Now, with that in mind, I'm excited for this group of people. These are great scholars. We are more than honored to have them here with us. These scholars are passionate about this topic. Alberto already mentioned the title of the session, but I want to give a special welcome to our panelists and really look forward to what you have to say and we're excited to learn more. So with that, I'm going to stop talking, turn this back over to Alberto, and again, welcome everybody and thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Hill, for your welcoming address. And now, ladies and gentlemen, let me inform you about the wonderful panel speakers of this session. Joining us live from Japan, we have Dr. Rajiv Shaw, professor of the Graduate School of Media and Governance at Keio's University Shonan Fujisawa campus. Joining us live from the United States is Dr. Divya Chandrasekhar, Associate Professor for the Department of City and Metropolitan Planning at the University of Utah in Salt Lake City. Here in the room, we are glad to have Dr. Hwan-Young Kim, Associate Professor of the School of Architecture and Architectural Engineering at Hanyang University here in South Korea. And also joining us from the United States is Dr. Ibis Garcia, Assistant Professor of the Department of City and Metropolitan Planning at the University of Utah in Salt Lake City. We also here in the room have my colleague, Dr. Rasul Hassan, Assistant Professor of Urban Ecology at the Department of City and Metropolitan Planning at the University of Utah Asia campus here in Yeonsu. So thank you all for honoring us with your participation in this special session. Please be informed that after all speakers' presentations are completed, we will deliver an urban ecology address followed by a Q&A time. So we truly encourage the audience to participate. So please drop your questions and comments in the chat box if you are joining us from YouTube. And simply raise your hand if you're here in the room during the Q&A time, and we will provide you with a mic, I believe, for you to participate. So now let me introduce Dr. Shaw. We will commence with our first presentation titled Community Resilience and Lifelong Learning. This session will be delivered by Dr. Rajiv Shaw, and his extensive curriculum is really hard to summarize. So please let me try. Dr. Shaw is a professor in Graduate School of Media and Governance at Keio University's Shonan Fujisawa campus, and a distinguished professor at the Institute for Disaster Management and Reconstruction at Sichuan University in China. Earlier, he was the executive director of the Integrated Research on Disaster Risk, a decade-long research program co-sponsored by the International Council for Science, the International Social Science Council, and the United Nations International Strategy for Disaster Reduction. His expertise includes community-based disaster risk management, climate change adaptation, urban risk management, disaster, and environmental education. Dr. Shaw has published more than 45 books and over 400 academic papers and books chapters. So Dr. Shaw has prepared a recorded video presentation for us, which I believe will be played right now. So please enjoy.
Hello, good afternoon, good morning. Thank you very much for inviting me. And my name is Rajiv Shaw. I'm sorry that I can't be there with you, but I hope that this presentation gives you some glimpses of what we talk about the community resilience and lifelong learning. What you see here on the left-hand side photo, that this is a tradition which exists in Japan, possibly many other East Asian countries, that when you need the help, your neighbors come voluntarily to replace this house roof. And the same thing you will reciprocate when your neighbors need it. So the community resilience is core, is this particular mutual trust and mutual help. Right-hand side is a Chinese character, which is known as, in Japanese, we call kizuna, which is the community bond. And these two I often use as the symbol of community resilience. Now, when you talk about the education for sustainability, education for sustainability is a lifelong learning process. We are talking here about the lifelong learning that leads to an informed and involved citizenry having the creative problem-solving skills, scientific and social literacy, commitment to engage in responsible, very important line here, individual and cooperative action. Ultimately, this lifelong learning process and individual and cooperative action is very, very important. When we talk about also this education, so the important is how it bridges between classroom and business and between schools and communities. We often use this particular word, like it's a phrase like, tell me, I will forget, so me, I may remember, involve me, I will understand. I'm sure that what I'm talking, maybe only just my talk part, possibly most of you will forget it, but possibly you may remember some of the slides, some of the images. But when you are actually get involved, so it's a very important part of lifelong learning process is the involvement. So how we actually involve different generations, how we involve different communities is the core for education for sustainability. Also, some of the other key points, attitude and values of lifelong learning, it starts from care for the community, respect for the beliefs and opinion to others, respect for evidence and rational argument, tolerance and open-mindedness. So these are possibly a few values, attitudes for lifelong learning. And lifelong learning is something we call learning to know, where you recognize the challenge, learning to do, where you actually practice or act with determination. But the most important part of lifelong learning is learning to be, when all the learning becomes internalized in yourself and you become a dignity or dignified human being. So I think that's very, very important. And it's a stepwise process. I'd like to talk about a couple of issues here. Like many of you know the 3R, reduce, reuse, and recycle. And this is 3R is the core principles of environmental education. In Japan, we use this particular word called mottainai, That means that you can't throw a product or a goods very easily. Like you need to reuse it as much as it can be. But this 3R principle is not only just the reduce, reuse, recycle, but it has a very strong philosophy of the life cycle approach, like how a product, when it is used, when it is made, and how long you actually keep on using that one. So again, this life cycle approach and the lifelong learning is a very, very important part of it. This particular graph shows a survey which we did among the school children in Japan. You see two bars. The upper one is those who has disaster experience and those who did not have disaster experience. So you will see that when we talk about the education on the top, the perception. So education, I think most of the Japanese students, they do disaster education. There are so many different disasters in Japan. So you do lots of education. So most of them have relatively high education level, like they know what to do during, before, after the disaster. They have a high perception also. But then when it comes to the preparedness, this ratio actually falls. So what is the main challenge? And that's what I tell here, the problem, that the education, possibly what we give, it gives knowledge, it gives perception. But the more larger challenge is how we bring that perception into specific action. So the action part is very important. And then we made a little bit of deeper dig into the survey. We found that how you can facilitate action. So we tried to develop a model which has different types of education, school. This was on earthquake. So earthquake experience, EE, the school, community, family, and self-education. And there are different stages. You have the knowledge, you perceive it, you deepen it, you have a wish to prepare, and then you actually prepare it. And we found a major difference between perception and preparedness, where perception, the school education plays a very important role. But when it comes at the preparedness, the community and the family education plays a very, very important role. So that actually also brings back to our earlier point, like the community resilience and the lifelong learning, what you can learn from the community, what you can learn within the community. There possibly no replacement of that by any formal education system, either it is in the school or in the university. So, and also the family values, what our parents taught us, what we will be teaching to our next generation. So that value system is also very, very important for this overall learning process. We often use this model called KIDA, which is knowledge, interest, desire, and action, KIDA. I mentioned it a couple of times that the action is the most important part, be it disaster education, be it environmental education, be it education for sustainable development. So, but action does not happen instantly. So we need a process. So we developed this particular document with some research called 1, 2, 3 of disaster education. One is it's an 1-year program. 2 is 2 level, and 3 are 3 types of hazard. We had typhoon, earthquake, and flood. And the important part, what we try to emphasize here, that often when we talk about disaster education, it is event-based. We have a drill today. We have done something else, maybe in the community, but how we make the continuum of education between 2 or 3 different events. So that's why we call it's a year-based learning program. And every month or every time there are some sort of learning, be it in home, be it in school, be it in community. So we develop this particular framework where on the right-hand side, what you see here, that there are some priority actions, some optional activity. This is for some sort of checklist and community interactions and so on. So this is for the flood. And we have kept a few boxes open. So this is monthly, quarterly, annually, and then priority action as well as optional activity to be done in home community school. So an education, a lifelong education cannot be a prescriptive one. You can possibly develop a framework, but it needs to come more within the student or within the community. And that's how we kept these boxes open, where actually the student, teachers, they can actually fill up that box based on their interest, based on the local conditions. So again, my emphasis here is that this is a framework I'm mentioning, but this is not a very specific this is not a very specific prescriptive one that you have to follow exactly this thing. So it's very important for the lifelong learning process that we have the flexibility in the education process. So with that background, like when you talk about the evolution of disaster field, we have seen that there are possibly a few major disaster events which really changed. One was 1995 Hanshin-Awaji earthquake or Kobe earthquake that actually showed us that in spite of a very high technology level in Japan, still 6,400 people lost their lives. So it shows that the importance of the community or importance of different types of discipline. And we often say that almost 98% people, they were rescued by their neighbors or their family members. The formal search and rescue team came much later. So the importance of community was felt very strongly. 2004, the Indian Ocean tsunami, and it shows it had around 64 or 65 nationalities, people who were affected. Many people from Northern Europe, they came to Asia, like Thailand or Sri Lanka or Maldives or Indonesia, and got affected. One of the key important part is there in the global world. It's not that, okay, I only know the risk of my area. This is very important, but we often travel. So the basic risk perception is very, very important. And the tsunami showed the importance, the very good story of a high school girl, Tilly Smith. Maybe it's a very famous story that she read about tsunami in her geography class. She was from UK. They had no experience of tsunami, but she read in geography that when the water recedes, then there might be a larger wave. So when people were going to take the videos, so she warned everyone and asked them to evacuate, and it could save around 200 people's lives. So that's the importance of very basic education. And another one was the Tohoku earthquake, which is the East Japan earthquake and tsunami 10 years back. And it shows the importance of networks of volunteers, networks of local government, networks of business sector. So it all came together. So now let me just very briefly go through a couple of important points which are related to, these are emerging issues for community resilience, especially in the urban area. You know that the traditional approach in the community based disaster risk reduction is getting lots of challenges because of the climate change issues, because lots of demographic pressures and so on. So the role of citizen science becomes very important. And this is a very simple tool which we developed for an Indian city called Varanasi. And many of the cities, whether it is in developed or developing country, we see differential flooding, like differential inundation, because of sometimes the sewage system, because of the change of these microclimatic conditions. So it's very important to understand that which part of the city is underwater. So here we engage the citizen with the students that to take the photo, and with the augmented reality AR, so you can actually measure the level or height of the inundation. And then there is a color coding, blue, yellow, green. Blue is less than 30 millimeter. Yellow is 30 to 40 millimeter, red is more than 40 millimeter, and then you upload that photo, and then it automatically takes the location and it's plotted on the Google map so that it shows that which part of the city has become which level of the inundation. So this is again a very simple tool, but their citizen participation becomes very, very important, because it's just impossible for the local government to give early warning for everybody. So that's one part. When you talk about the awareness and education in the cities, many of the cities in Asia are facing lots of water-related problems. So we have this major urban drought. We recently published a book on the urban drought. When you talk about drought, usually the image comes that, okay, it's in Africa or it's in the rural area, agriculture is affected. But due to our lifestyle change in the urban area, the water security is a major challenge in Asia Pacific region. So how we can actually save water? And now there are lots of new innovations coming up, like this tap aerator, which actually brings the air and mix it with water so that it shows that lots of water is coming, but it actually saves almost 90% of the water. Then eco tap or eco break, like when you are not using the water, it automatically stops. Or online monitoring of the water usage, because we often don't know that how much water we are using. So you can actually set up that. There are lots of this type of apps. You can set up your target, your family member, and then it can give you some sort of warning type of thing. So this is, again, new business innovations which are coming up in the urban area. But another also very important part of the urban area is the volunteerism and the social innovation. In some of the cities we are working, like there are water volunteers, how you can create water volunteers, especially before the dry season, before the summer come up. So there are lots of social media campaign. There are lots of different types of the contemporary media, the traditional media campaign, and so on. So the volunteer role becomes very, very important. In the traditionally, there are rural water council also, but then urban-rural connectivity also becomes very, very important. There, one of the very important issue which comes is how we involve the youth and the young population, because they have a possibly different mindset. They possibly, if you have a traditional community-based meeting, it's usually dominated by the aged population. But if it is something like new innovation, entrepreneurship, you bring new technology, then possibly the youth group becomes very, very important, very, very interested. So the science-based entrepreneurship is one of the very critical issue which we are currently trying to promote in different cities, in different universities, and try to develop some sort of incubation approach. And again, it's like a community, it's a virtual community, but it's an youth group community, and giving them different types of option, different types of social problem, and engage them into the social problem solution or the social innovation. And that's, again, possibly a totally new concept of community resilience, which we are going to, which was not there maybe before this social media came in, maybe 20 years back or even 15 years back. But this is a new trend, and I'm sure that this will be quite popular in future. I know time is limited, so my final comments are that we need to remember that the communities are at the core of lifelong learning process, both for disaster risk reduction, environmental management, also sustainable development. We need to have a balance between mixture of indigenous practices and emerging technologies. The role of youth is extremely, extremely critical, because we are talking about the future. We are talking about a lifelong learning. And there are many new trends which are coming, whether it is the citizen science, whether it is the youth volunteer, whether it is the science entrepreneurship, whether it is the different types of incubation approach. And these will be the new trends for lifelong learning process and community resilience. So with that, I would like to end my presentation. Thank you very much for your kind listening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Shaw, for your very insightful presentation. I think he got all of us at the very beginning with this almost philosophical concept of if you need help, your neighbor is there to help, and that kind of concept. But then he went also all the way through innovation, which is like a very interesting topic and definitely related to community resilience and the importance of network, right? Which is again essential. So now, without further ado, I think we're going to move on to the next presentation. So our session continues with the second presentation. This time we have Dr. Divya Chandrasekhar delivering her session on alternative platforms of recovery and self-representation. Dr. Chandrasekhar is an associate professor at the College of Architecture and Planning from the University of Utah with expertise in community recovery from disasters. Her extensive research has examined post-disaster community participation and capacity building, networking, and coordination. And she specializes in qualitative inquiry and mixed methods studies. Since 2015, she has been a member of the Utah State Hazard Mitigation Team, the Utah State Hazard Mitigation Plan Advisory Committee, and an affiliate of the Global Change and Sustainability Center at the University of Utah. I believe Divya is also joining us live from Salt Lake City, but to avoid any potential connection issues, she has kindly sent a recorded video, but we will be glad to have her live from Salt Lake City in our Q&A session. So please enjoy this video presentation by Dr. Chandrasekhar.
Hi, my name is Divya Chandrasekhar, and I am an associate professor at the University of Utah in City and Metropolitan Planning. And I'm here today to talk about alternative platforms of recovery and self-representation after disasters. Now, when people think of the process of recovery, this is the process they're typically thinking about. A disaster hits the community members get together, create a plan, rebuild their community. But in reality, this is not how recovery happens. More often than not, disasters don't affect everybody, and they don't affect everybody equally. Not everybody is included in the recovery process. Let's admit it. People don't often like each other. Not everything is a plan. Sometimes it's a policy document, sometimes it's a list of projects, and sometimes it's nothing. It's just straight to building. And not everything is rebuilt or in the same timeline. And so recovery is really a very complex process involving multiple actions by multiple diverse stakeholders, all driven by their specific capacities to take that action, and often in very contested forms, which basically means that recovery has no standard process, which also means that there is no standard representation form. And that means alternative forms of recovery and representation are perfectly normal after disasters. They are to be expected and arguably healthy, because you want multiple means and multiple venues and multiple mediums of representing and being heard. And so here I am today to talk about 3 different non-traditional pathways to representation in recovery. And the first pathway I want to talk about is alliance. This is the process of coming together to increase your resource capacity in a crunch and to be heard in larger forums. And a great example of that is the Neighborhood Partnership Network that came into being in New Orleans, Louisiana, after the 2004 Hurricane Katrina. This is in the US. And what this organization did was it built a consortium of smaller nonprofits, smaller community-based organizations like residents associations, to help them to improve their capacity to not only serve their community, but to be heard in larger forums, citywide plans, for example. And so through capacity building workshops, through networking, through training on grant writing, this alliance helped its members to be heard in larger forums. A second way is insurgency. This is stepping outside the normal bounds of recovery planning to be radical in your recovery efforts. And a great example is URBAPI in Caguas, Puerto Rico. URBAPI is a community-based organization that has, since the 2017 hurricanes Maria and Irma, basically squatted or taken over abandoned properties in Caguas. And they have repurposed these properties into community gardens, into galleries for their community to use for arts and artists in residence, and to provide homeless shelters. They continue to do this work to date. And so this is doing recovery through your own means outside of a formal recovery process. And third is discovery. This is one of my favorite stories from the 2004 tsunami that hit Tamil Nadu. And this is it's a story from a small fishing village that was going through a relocation planning process with the NGO partner. And midway through this process, that relationship broke down. And so here was the panchayat, mostly male dominated, left in a hole. They were halfway through reconstructing and no money. So in stepped these women of the community who had had an existing relationship with a different NGO through a livelihood training program. And the women were instrumental in bringing this new NGO resource into the relocation planning process so it could continue smoothly. And through this process of discovering their own capacity, the women had transformed the way the community, the broader community, looked at them as valued stakeholders in the process, but also transformed the way the women thought of themselves as valued stakeholders in the process. And so these are just three non-traditional ways of finding representation recovery, but there are, of course, many more. Thank you for listening to me. Again, I'm Divya Chandrasekhar from the University of Utah.
So thank you so much, Divya, for your great presentation. I believe she will be able to add and elaborate a bit further during the Q&A, but definitely interesting how that theory versus reality conflict, right? Like you might have some theory, but reality hits you. And, very interesting three alternative platforms that I will be looking forward to listen more during the Q&A. So now, without further ado, let's continue this fantastic session with our third presentation. This time joining us here from the conference venue, we have Dr. Hwan-Young Kim, delivering his session titled Understanding Green Infrastructure as a Community Asset for Urban Resilience. Dr. Kim is an associate professor of the School of Architecture and Architectural Engineering at the Hanyang University, where he leads the Urban Design and Informatics Research Lab. His multidisciplinary research interests include geographic information systems, building information modeling, smart city development, AR, VR, and drone applications on land use planning and sustainable urban simulations. Dr. Kim also serves as a board member in the Urban Design Institute of Korea and has published extensively in urban planning journals on a variety of resilience-related topics. So please welcome him with a big round of applause.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Finally, someone who actually in this room speaks out. My name is Hwan Kim. I'm an associate professor at Hanyang University. Before I begin my presentation, I would like to say it's an honor to be here. And I really appreciate this opportunity and become part of this big event worldwide. Today, what I'm going to talk about is that perhaps most of you heard about the term green infrastructure. And what I'm going to talk about shortly today is how we use green infrastructure as a community asset and increase our urban resiliency. And then how do we merge those steps and processes into educational systems? So, Alberto already introduced me a little, but I'm leading the Urban Design and Informatics Lab at Hanyang University, Erica. And my backgrounds are using evidence-based planning and design. And I'm much interested in planning decision-making environment using tools like GIS, BIM, and things like that. And as for green infrastructure, I've been conducting research project for 6 years, fully funded by National Research Foundation in South Korea. So I know a little bit about green infrastructure, so I can speak today. So about green infrastructure and urban resiliency, this entire event is about how we talk about increasing resiliency of the city by emphasizing the learning processes. And I'm pretty sure you guys know what urban resilience is. So I'm not going to go over what urban resilience is and what that means into our 21st century. So what I want to emphasize is that whenever we are talking about urban resiliency, it always related to whether physical or non-physical aspect of urban planning and design in nowadays. What that means is that if you want to talk about increased sustainability and resilience side of our city, you have to deal with urban planning and urban design is the key component in those entire processes. Among those many entities in urban design and planning, probably green infrastructure can be a very important role. Like, for example, stormwater management, climate adaptation, reduction of heat island, and air quality, clean water, all those things related to infrastructure. And traditionally speaking, our cities have been deeply involved in increasing brown infrastructure, which is the directly opposite term to green infrastructure, building road, heavy infrastructure, railways, airport, and seaport, things like that. Those traditional way has benefit us in terms of economy and development. However, it's really good time for us to actually think a little differently and change those brown infrastructure into greener and sustainable way. And that in that case, green infrastructure can become a very important role to create urban resiliency and increase sustainable capacity of our city. There are a number of different implications that you can think about when we are talking about green infrastructure. And there are a large number of publications already published outside that the green infrastructure can benefit us in many ways. Using green infrastructure, we can expect flooding mitigation, heat absorption, air dynamics, increased air dynamics, and other many environmental benefits to the society. And this is especially important to the vulnerable cohort inside the city, especially who are really weak and vulnerable to climate changes. And those cohorts are especially feeling more damage when we are having extreme weather conditions and extreme weather event. So having those types of green infrastructure inside our city is not only related to just our sustainability side of the city, but it also related to the matter of the existence of our vulnerable population. Whether it's called low impact development or water sensitive design, I mean, usually it's the same term, but usually North American continent likes to call it low impact development, and European countries like to call it water sensitive design. It's the same term, whether it's WSD or LID. We can use LID or WSD using green infrastructure as a key ingredient to change our entire city and society so that we can have a better and brighter future for our next generations. Let me give you a one good example that actually green infrastructure works in our city planning context. Of course, this research was done by myself, and it was recently published by an article, journal, early this year. Using the 8th largest city, Ulsan, which is a far southern part of South Korea, our research team has evaluated whether green infrastructure can lower some financial impact of the people living in there. And the research results indicate that if we have a 1 square kilometer increase of green infrastructure inside the city, then we can actually reduce about $44,000 in terms of insurance payment. What that means is that you can reduce your natural disaster damage in financial terms by $44,000, and that's a 2019 currency. And the result even gets more interesting. When we have those green infrastructure inside the floodplain, then the insurance damage could be reduced by $950,000. That's almost double the size. So what that means, by using this research result, we can think about just implementing more green infrastructure in green spaces, open spaces, whatever it is. If we increase those spaces inside our city, we can hugely reduce those risks and all those associated financial costs. This is one of many empirical results that we already see in academic field. So this is just one of the ongoing effort, and we are actually, our research team is conducting second level study and using the environmental cost for using those green infrastructure and how do we benefit them, and we are comparing benefit cost analysis using that. So let me, since we are talking about learning cities, let me slightly move on with those research results and talk about learning processes. The problem about those green infrastructure and benefits of those green infrastructure is that we know, we understand, and there are a lot of research record there. The problem about this is that it's not actually merged well into formal educational systems. The reason behind is that it really requires a lot of heavy knowledge and mathematics and all those analytical results. However, now there are a large number of technologies that we can use, and forget about mathematics, forget about all those heavy techniques. You can just intuitively use those technologies and we can understand the benefits and advantages of using green infrastructure in urban planning in the 21st century. And this is especially important when we are talking about participatory planning and building consensus among different stakeholders. So probably the video should start. And 이거 비디오 좀 켜주시겠어요? Those two videos are latest example of using kind of fancy technology in urban planning. The left side is about how do we change urban plans and actually understand those changing plans could result, such as commercial areas increase and in terms of commercial jobs increase. And the right side is kind of mixed reality that you can use your city in three-dimensional format. What I'm trying to talk about by showing these videos is that you don't need to be a mathematician. You don't need to be a rocket scientist to use those tools. These are very intuitive, and you just can use it very simple, short learning processes. But in university, I'm a professor myself, but in university, the traditional educational system is really rigid and it's really hard adapt to those rapidly changing technologies. But if we can implement those things into lifelong learning system, and not just a formal education, traditional education, if we can implement those technology into lifelong learning system, then people will understand why do we need green infrastructure? Why do we need green spaces inside the city? It's not just about having a fun there. It's about a matter of life. And as for those tools, in terms of the effort, the Korean government, 왼쪽 비디오 좀 틀어주실래요? 왼쪽 비디오. Okay, it's working. As for the Korean government, this is not intended for the educational purposes, but the entire government is putting a lot of effort, money, and a lot of people there to build something called the digital twin. What digital twin means is that you are creating a digital copy of our entire society. And the video you see on the left side is actually the digital twin of Incheon here right now. I help with them, Incheon Metropolitan Government, I work with them to create digital twin here. And the beauty of using digital twin is that you can do simulation before you actually build something out. Planning and design decisions are very critical because once you make decisions, it lasts like 50, 100, 200 years. So having a great simulation, and if you enhance understanding about your decision making throughout urban planning, that actually gives you insight about the consequences that we'll experience in reality. And the right side video that you see is the software tool, application tool developed by Autodesk. And that actually gives you, so it's a really intuitive Autodesk tool, and you can use it to how to measure green infrastructure can play an important role in the urban planning process and for the new development areas. And what I'm trying to say here is that This is not a very difficult and very professional ways to do something. These are very intuitive and very easy to learn. Probably less than a month of education, you can easily play with those tools. And the formal education system is really hard to adapt those different tools because there are diverse range of tools outside. But if we are talking about lifelong learning system, and that could be a great position that we can talk about. I was talking about a lot of technologies because I'm a technocrat myself. I use a lot of technologies here in my research, but these are a kind of a new way that we can talk about urban planning, but there are always traditional ways too. This video is created by the US EPA.
Lakes and seacoasts make our region a special place, yet their fragility is increasingly evident. Rain flows down our roofs, sidewalks, and roads, turning rain into polluted stormwater runoff, the #1 threat to clean water in New England. EPA launched Soak Up the Rain as a call to action to citizens, businesses, and communities. To all of us who care about clean water, want to reduce flooding, and create healthier and more beautiful communities. We can help by using green infrastructure solutions to soak up the rain, by planting rain gardens, installing rain barrels, and installing pervious walkways and driveways. Green infrastructure can help prevent water pollution, reduce flooding, replenish groundwater, increase property values, cool the air, save energy and money, and beautify our neighborhoods.
The rushing waters that we get carry with them numerous toxins from our streets, rubber, and the heavy metals left behind by tires, as well as any fluids that leak from our cars. They also pick up animal feces, pesticides, and all the fertilizers.
As long as the streets are clear, your basement's not flooded, people don't even realize that stormwater is an issue. So every house contributes to stormwater runoff and the pollutants that get carried with it. We've launched Soak Up the Rain in Arlington, mainly to educate people, businesses and the municipalities as well, to capture runoff before it becomes a problem. Take it out of the streets, take it out of the driveways, direct it into areas where you can soak up the rain.
I am soaking up the rain with a rain garden. I mean, look at the flowers, they're beautiful. We had some rainwater in the basement that came in, and it's helped a lot to keep the water out of there and put it in the front yard instead, and it soaks it up.
So the rain barrels are actually saving me money. So I have 2 rain barrels in the back of the house in order to water the garden, and that's all free water.
Our playground area, which would be underwater for months in the
It's about 5 minutes video, but we have a limited time, so I'm gonna stop here. The reason that I'm showing this video is because that using technology is one way that we can deal with green infrastructure. But as you can see, there are a lot of community engagement efforts are ongoing as well. So to finish my presentation, what I'm trying to talk about today is that having more green infrastructure could increase urban resilience, and that's for sure. That's been already proven by our numerous research evidences. How do we merge them into teaching and learning environment? There are 2 different approaches that we can talk about. Software-oriented, just like I showed you with a lot of applications and tools, we can merge those new platforms and solution-based learning environment into the educational system. At the same time, we can also talk about hardware-oriented, just as community engagement and tactical urbanism, those types of things. Activity-based learning system, we can use those 2 different technologies into the educational system and provide lifelong learning system as educational contents. In that way, we don't have to actually prove something. We can actually educate people and make a consensus from the start. And that will literally actually increase our resilience capacity of the city. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kim, for this very informative presentation. I mean, physical versus non-physical planning, infrastructure, brown versus green, and the importance of, actually treating green infrastructure as a saving resources, saving money sort of tool. And precisely, you went from, it's not high tech versus low tech, it's high tech and low tech, because I think that's a pretty interesting, approach that you gave us. So yeah, without further ado, please let's move on to the fourth presentation. So now I have the privilege to introduce this fourth presentation. Also join us live from main campus land, our main campus land, Salt Lake City. We have Dr. Ivis Garcia, who will be delivering her session titled Lessons from Community Engagement in 2 Planning Courses. Dr. Garcia is an assistant professor in the College of Architecture and Planning from the University of Utah and vice chair of the Planning Commission in Salt Lake City. She's an urban planner with research interests in the areas of community development, housing, and engagement. She has spent time as a community organizer and planner in Albuquerque, New Mexico, San Francisco, California, Springfield, Missouri, Washington, D.C., and most recently in Chicago. I also understand that Ivis is joining us live, but in the interest of time, she has kindly sent a recorded video of her presentation. I will be glad to have her joining us during the Q&A session. So please enjoy the video recorded presentation by Dr. Garcia.
The University of Utah partnered with the Salt Lake City Public Lands Division to conduct community engagement activities in an effort to understand the values of the Salt Lake City community. Students use a variety of techniques to solicit feedback to be incorporated into the Salt Lake City Public Lands Master Plan. The emergence of embedded planning and a push to demystify planning in communities has consistently led to a call for inclusive community engagement. However, there's relatively little research devoted to what methods can reach communities in a way that is both representative and meets them where they are. In this work, we ask, was our combination of outreach methods effective at making community engagement more meaningful?
For our methods, we met people where they are by intercept interviews, organizational outreach, and online engagement. Intercept interviews refer to in-person solicitation of the survey initiated through a cold approach in a public space. We contacted local organizations by email, phone, or in person to introduce community stakeholders to the initiative and request them to distribute survey materials and hang a poster in their location. We shared the digital survey link to different group pages over social media, not repetitive with the organizations contacted already. We facilitated 6 different focus groups that had about 10 community members or representatives in attendance who were from or affiliated with a traditionally underrepresented community.
Hybrid online and in-person surveying process resulted in a large sample of the population of Salt Lake City. We conducted 610 intercept interviews and 3,621 online interviews, all totaling 4,368 people. But more importantly, through the hybrid approach, we were able to broaden the diversity of the population we reached, specifically in terms of age, race, and incomes. The online survey reached a relatively older, higher earning, and predominantly white population, while the in-person interviews reached a younger, lower earning, and more racially diverse group. Lack of diversity among our online survey responses, like we saw, we targeted our intercept interview as much as possible toward the city's west and northwest neighborhoods. These communities are the most ethnically diverse areas of the city and have much less park space per person than other parts of the city. Lastly, Figure 6 show the number of surveys conducted through in-person intercept interviews overlaid over the area's population density.
Throughout our case study, we found that in order to capture a more representative sample, we must employ a multi-level and multidimensional strategies of engagement. We conclude that cities should consider more interactive ways of doing so, such as the one we mentioned, like intercept interviews, focus groups, pop-up events, and more. Approaching people where they are allows planners to interact with the community and weave strong bonds with individuals. Therefore, meeting people where they are, it's an equitable engagement effort, since it's recognized the existing special gaps of the traditional ways of acquiring public feedback.
The West Side Studio is a course with Dr. Evis Garcia in the Department of City and Metropolitan Planning at the University of Utah. During the spring semester of 2021, this class was focused on two main goals: planning an Earth Day event on Salt Lake City's west side and continuing collaborations with Salt Lake City's Parks and Public Lands Department on their Reimagine Nature Master Plan campaign. Over the course of the semester, students completed a number of tasks which contributed to the successes of the overall projects. Students participated in stakeholder workshops where they listened, observed, took notes, and transcribed stakeholder meetings to understand possible transformational projects or big ideas in order to support the goals of the future master plan. They conducted both demographic analyses around parks as well as park equity audits by collecting, analyzing, and presenting data from public sources and conducting and recording visual observations of park site conditions. To prepare for the Earth Day event, each of the three groups prepared an event grant proposal, which included a statement of need and rationale, implementation strategies, outcomes, budget, matching funds, supporting organizations, and a community engagement plan. Each group hosted placemaking workshops to engage West Side residents and other community members in placemaking ideas and implementation projects, including one workshop that was more general and one that was more specific to the goals and plans for the Earth Day event. Each student in the class conducted a series of online and in-person outreach with Salt Lake City residents, business owners, and organizations to inform them about how to get involved with the Salt Lake City Parks and Public Lands Reimagine Nature campaign, as well as with the Earth Day event.
Throughout the semester, students at the University of Utah worked with the Salt Lake City Public Lands Division to conduct community outreach and further the mission of the Reimagine Nature Master Plan. The culmination of these spring 2021 efforts was the Earth Day event, held on Saturday, April 24th. Community members enjoyed a day full of learning, volunteering, and fun, interacting with local nonprofits and other organizations to learn more about their city, the Jordan River, and the Reimagine Nature Plan. Community members helped paint murals at the 9th South River Park, led by artist Kevon Riley. These energetic volunteers were excited to return to the park and see the artwork that they had helped create. Eventgoers reimagined what SLC could be like and took surveys to assist in the further development of the master plan. Volunteers planted flowers in the planting beds at the front of the park, and trees were also planted in the park before the event took place to enliven and beautify the space. Those who took part in the survey enjoyed a delicious free lunch as well. Custom stencils and donated spray paint were used to create vibrant art, and provide the Jordan River Trail and surrounding areas with visual directions or wayfinding to help pedestrians navigate the neighborhood. Volunteers also participated in cleaning up litter around both the 9th South and Poplar Grove parks. Artist Miriam Gutierrez helped residents reimagine nature with an incredible stylized map showcasing local landmarks. Community members were delighted to see the place they call home so beautifully represented at the park. The University of Utah Ecological Planning Workshop would like to thank all those involved in this wonderful event for their service, participation, and support.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this wonderful presentation on community outreach and the perspective coming from two planning courses Dr. Garcia has led, and also, the importance of multi-layer strategies and that idea of bringing the students out to the real local communities and engaging with them in topics of such importance as placemaking or taking ownership of their own neighborhoods. So really nice. So now, and I've been informed by the organizations that we have to speed up a little bit our pace. In the interest of time, we have to be very cautious with that. So please welcome my colleague, Dr. Rezul Hassan, for his Utah Asia Campus Urban Ecology Address on educational principles and contributions of urban ecology principles to lifelong learning. So please give a hand to my colleague, Dr. Hassan.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And I really like to thank you, UNESCO and INSUGU, for giving us the opportunity and choosing Urban Ecology Program and University of Utah for this one. So I'm not, because all the experts are here, so I'm not going to give any expert opinion. Rather, I am saying why Urban Ecology Program is doing here. Because I'm just echoing our Professor Dr. Greg, that we are coming in University of Utah Asia Campus here for 2,000 kilometer travel, just not for getting another ranking, rather to work for the community. The knowledge that we produce here, that we can share with the community. And that is the lifelong learning, a self-paced learning where people can learn and then can continue in the community building, rather not getting a degree. And Urban Ecology Department is exactly doing this one. So I'm not going to define what is lifelong learning is, but how we are teaching in Urban Ecology Program at the University of Utah here. So, okay, because we are creating, we already know that our whole human system are highly connected to the environment. Every single thing we got it from our environment. So we are connected to the ecosystem service. If you think that we are out of this part, then we are not killing ourselves, but we are making the whole world impossible for our next generation. And COVID-19 is a very good example of that one. So we are in Urban Ecology Department, we are creating and teaching ecosystem, where we are saying that our goal is connecting environment with the community. And a teaching ecosystem is like where that learning with the community, our students will learn their degrees and the whatever knowledge they get, they bring it to the community. They practice with the Korean communities and American communities, how they could be a future leader. And then using the technology, that's the advantage of being in Korea. We can use the technology. Professor Kim was next to me. Like that's what we can use in Korea. Like we can use the technology and learn with the community and achieve the target of sustainable development goal, which is the Korean target and the target for the next world. And that is what in Urban Ecology Program, we are teaching our students. And that is what we bring from Salt Lake for the Korean community, and not only for the Korean community, but for the global community in the whole world. Thank you so very much for joining us. And I shouldn't take it long. So thank you so very much.
Thank you, Dr. Hassan, for that introduction to our program. And it's been great to have you here and to address also those aspects. So right now, as I said, in the interest of time, we have to be very cautious because of two reasons. One, there is more program scheduled on this room. And second, and even more important one, is lunchtime here in Korea. So let's proceed with a Q&A session that rather than a Q&A, it's going to be actually providing speakers time, let's say around 2 or 3 times per speaker to kind of give general comments, insights, aspects, maybe pointing out something from their presentations. I believe for that we have the pleasure of having our speakers from the other side of the world joining us in a very late evening time, I believe. So I think as you know, out of respect, please, Divya, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Alberto, and thank you also to the conference organizers for inviting me to be part of this panel, this distinguished panel. Such exciting presentations, everybody talking about engagement. And I think the main topic here has been about lifelong learning. And I think the point of some of my presentation was that some of that learning happens through alternative means, especially when we talk about disasters and the kind of pressures societies feel in the moment of disasters. And so as we try and promote this notion of community engagement and community involvement, inclusion in whatever process we are trying to promote, we might want to consider the different ways in which that engagement must occur, and not just can occur, but it typically occurs. And so, you know, I agree with a lot of the panelists who mentioned that in the capacity of different stakeholders might differ, and the value of engagement to building resilience in that community. And I think I'll just, in the interest of time, Alberto, I'll just stop there.
Thank you so much, Divya, for your very timely and straightforward comments. And yeah, I love that you're joining us from the very same environment that you were recording your presentation. So it almost seems that you were here all the time. So thank you for those comments and those insights. And I believe now it's time for Dr. Garcia-Ibis. Please, the floor is yours.
Well, it's a great pleasure to join you all. And I see how our campuses are connected and how we have this mission of creating in our students people that are very connected with communities. I think that was a theme that you can get by the different research that we are doing, thinking about sustainability and thinking about how we can use different approaches. So that's something that my presentation also tried to highlight. There's not like one way of doing community engagement or reaching out the community. There's like multiple ways, and there's like one-on-one. There's might also be surveys. So I think that's something that I noticed as a theme as well, is this idea that engagement doesn't only happen when you are creating a plan, a policy, or a strategy. That is definitely important to do outreach, but there's very important to stay connected with the community to do implementation for networking purposes, in order to increase social capital, to be more resilient in the future against like disasters. And we might also emphasize in the era of COVID as well. So again, I see a lot of themes throughout this presentation that in a way bring us together, and especially brings together our mission as researchers, but also educators. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ibis. Thank you very much. And definitely, again, thank you both of you for staying with us until this very late evening. And I believe I can utilize this time to invite all our audience to go and enjoy the diverse and welcoming community we have in Salt Lake City. And at the same time, we invite you guys, Divya and Ibis, to come over here to Yeonsu, Seongdo. We'll be welcoming you, in the best possible way. So yeah, let's keep that connection open. So again, thank you so much. And to wrap up the closing remarks, I would like to give the floor to Dr. Kim here on my left. If you have any general comment or wrap up statement, please share with us.
It's lunchtime now. So lunchtime in Korea is very rapidly moving, so you have to be fast here. Anyway, well, I mean, I've been working as a faculty member at Texas A&M for 2 years, and I've been working as a faculty member at Thammasat University in Thailand for still working as an adjunct professor, and I've been working in professor in South Korea for almost 10 years. So I know the educational environment in the United States and East Asia and Korea here. What I'm trying to say is that the educational environment of those all continents is very different. And how you merge the latest technology and knowledge into the educational formal system is especially very challenging at the moment. However, what we need to talk about in terms of education, especially in South Korea, is that our population is decreasing, continuously decreasing, and it's dramatically decreasing. So just having formal education providing the same contents to our next generation will not work at all. So having more challenging to, lifelong learning systems such as this event, the main topic of this event, will become very critical agenda for our future generation. And for that reason, having such event like this one will give an insight to our government officials and professors like me, especially all those relevant people in Yeonsu especially. And hopefully this event and this opportunity will become a very good beginning point, a start point for us to rethink about our educational system, provide more opportunity for lifelong learning systems. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kim. That was a very good remark. And on that note, I would like to wrap up by saying thank you, all of you, for this very intense session and thought-provoking discussions throughout the day. I believe the broad range of presentations have widened our perspectives and understanding on how community engagement, active community engagement and awareness helps cities address the needs for inclusive urban contexts, but also ensuring that the citizens have an informed and participatory role in the societies of the future. And now, before I release you for lunch, I just want to make one last comment. Please visit our booth on the exhibition hall. It's under the name Borderless Urban Ecology. So urban ecology without borders, education without borders, extended education. We're really looking forward to have you there. Our booth is number D06. So with this, thank you everyone here in the room and out there in the world where you're joining us from today. And again, it's been a pleasure to be your moderator today. Thank you so much.